So, today we're going to look at something that is probably the most popular device that I've ever made, and I'm talking about the mastering chain for Ableton Live. And today we're going to take a deep dive into the parameters and what I thought about designing this thing. And first, let's talk a bit about mastering itself. So, if you're mixing your own music, maybe you're writing your own music as well, completely from scratch, and you also want to do the master of your own music, mastering is something completely different, because in the sense of mastering, usually it means you send it off to a person with a different set of ears, of course, and this person listens to your music and decides to make the final tweaks, maybe a broad tonal adjustment, and bring it up to standard loudness and specs for the streaming services or for CD or for whatever kind of medium you are planning to release your music on. For streaming, you just need at least a specific loudness, -14 LUFS, you probably have heard about that, and you also need a wave file, and that's pretty much it, and that's not too complicated, or is it? So here comes the big but. If you master your own music, you do not get the extra set of ears. So if you made a mistake before, you're probably not gonna notice it in the master as a mastering engineer would, because you're just doing it yourself again. And for that reason, I have built this device. So usually, if I get a song to master, it can be any song, any genre, it doesn't matter. There are usually some things that all songs have in common that need to be done. The first and most obvious is it needs to be up to the specific loudness of a genre, of the specs for streaming. So we need to have something like a limiter or something else to bring it up to a specific loudness. But there's much more than that. So I encounter also a lot of problems when people send me tracks to master, and it's not really their fault. I mean, if they would have known better, they wouldn't have needed a mastering engineer anyway. So that's basically my job. And most of the time, the first thing that I notice immediately is the low end. The low end is important to sit right, and it really doesn't matter the genre. There are some exceptions, maybe like freeform jazz or classical music. There you do not need to worry too much about low end. This music is not about low end. But if we talk about anything that involves electronic music, bands, and really any kind of bands, doesn't matter if indie rock or metal or hardcore or whatever, they all need to have a cohesive, consistent bass. So for that, I have low control as the first thing after the input volume or my mastering advanced device. The second thing I noticed, the high band. And the high band specifically is sometimes you have things poking out a bit too much and sometimes not enough. So when you master music, you only have a stereo file. I cannot go in and tweak something. I cannot go in and tweak the hi-hat or not go in and tweak the vocal. I have only the stereo wave file. So what I can do is I can make a dynamic band that reacts to the input. So if it's too much, it goes down a bit, and if it's too little, it goes up. So I have a cohesive, consistent high end as well. And this is basically what the high control band does in this device. The more you turn it up, the more active the compression becomes for the high band. Third, we have a deharshing algorithm. And deharshing, maybe you have heard of Sooth or Pro Q4. They all do something similar as something spectral. So you have many notches that react to the input volume and to certain spikes. And I made this specifically in the frequency range we're most sensitive in, which is between 2 kilohertz and 5 kilohertz. It's a range we are also prone to hear much faster. It's the human speech, and it becomes abrasive if you have too much. With these first three things, we have fought some problems, so to say. So the first three things can be seen as something to restore something, to correct something, to broadly take something away we don't want and make them sound more like a finished product. Everything that comes after is more of the creative type. Now we have OTT, and many people find this very funny because OTT is something that is so over the top. That's what OTT stands for. It's famously a preset in Ableton Live. Someone also made a plugin out of this specific preset, and I also have it in this chain. And what it basically does, it adds a lot of hype. It's compression, but the other way around. We only use the upward compression, and everything that's low level in detail we bring up in volume by a lot, by a ton. In this way, we also make the dynamic range smaller, which means we can get more overall loudness. And it also makes for more excitement as the dynamic range is shortened. So for genres like metal or EDM especially, you want it a lot, but for other genres maybe you want it a little bit less. Afterwards, we get a free band EQ. This is just for broad tone shaping, and you can also use this to accompany for the low and high control, as if you dial the high control a bit more, you will get less of high end because the compressor is reacting a lot, and you can compensate by turning it up again at this stage. And after that, we have compression, just like your general mix bus compression. And really, for my personal use case, I never touch the release time anyway. So I only gave you the attack time and the dry wet. Let's be honest, I don't only touch those two as well. So there's no point in giving you too much control of things you don't need. Afterwards, we have tape or clipping. It's like a soft clipper. You can use it to gain a little bit of distortion or also catch some peaks before the limiter, so you can drive it a bit more. We get after that a little bit of width, stereo width. You can use this also, of course, to automate, to make your chorus wider and your verse a little bit narrower, which gives explosion impact when the chorus opens. I like to do this a lot. And after that, you get the limiter with the attack and the ceiling. And that's basically it. One more word to say is that the limiter in Ableton Live is not really good. We can have a look here. If we look at the limiter, what I did here is I have two glue compressors afterwards that do nothing but soft clipping. And that is because Ableton is sadly not good at catching the peaks. Ableton will try, but maybe there's some small peak that's still pointing out. And if you really want to master your own music, this is typically something that you do not want, because that can result into crackle when listeners hear it if it gets over 0. So what did I do here? I enabled two soft clippers afterwards to shave them off even more as good as I can, but maybe you will have even more sample peaks. So I recommend to get maximum to -1 dB and not louder, not to 0 with the ceiling. That is why also the preset is at -1. You should be safe with that, but if you have a second limiter, a third-party plugin, it would be even better for this one. Now all the talking, we can get to do some listening. Sound check. And without. Sound check. We can hear it's of course much louder, so maybe let's try a little bit of loudness matching. Sound check. Sound check. So I matched the loudness, and we can hear with loudness matched as well that a lot of things as well have changed. Mainly the interplay between the instruments, everything sounds more glued, and when the kick drum and the snare hit, everything is more cohesive and ducks, everything gets brought up to the same level, kind of, and that's really what you want for this type of music. So I hope this was helpful, and have fun using this device. Link is in the description. Thanks.